They got way too much power, and we need to rein them in. We've got a number of pieces of legislation we're looking at. The simple one that is talked about a lot, but we should do it, is the Section 230, take away their liability protection that they currently enjoy. You got to get rid of that at a minimum. But I think you need transparency. You need to know when they're censoring, because we see the obvious stuff, like what they did to Marjorie when they took her off Twitter, what they did to President Trump, even though the Taliban's still on Twitter and President Trump and Marjorie get kicked off. So we see the obvious stuff. But what we don't see is how they throttle it back. I mean, how they will, if you're fundraising on the right versus conservative fundraising versus what they do for the left. So we don't see all that. I always use the example, this happened to me 3 years ago, in the summer of 2018. So I'm walking in, I get a call from Matt Gaetz. And, Matt's always he's always fired up. And he calls me, I answer the phone, and all he says is, Jim, Twitter is shadow banning us. And I'm like, wow, Matt, that sounds terrible, but what is it? I didn't know at the time. And he explains it to me. Turned out it was true. They were shadow banning 4 members of Congress. So I always say there, 435 members in the House, 100 in the Senate, 535. Only 4 were being shadow banned. Devin Nunes, Mark Meadows, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan. And I'm like, interesting 4 that they were doing this to. And it was right during the whole Mueller investigation. It happened to be the, Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan. And I was, Twitter, of course, put out a thing and said, well, it was just a glitch in our algorithm. It wasn't intentional. And I remember I was doing an interview and I said, glitch in your algorithm? What'd they put in the algorithm? The names Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan? I mean, come on, you kidding me? So we know that is happening. So we have to have, when they're doing that, we have to be able to see that. So we're looking at legislation there. And then also, we need speed on this. We need an answer soon. So antitrust legislation that the Trump administration had underway, we need those cases to get to the Supreme Court in an expedited way so we can get a ruling. And Justice Thomas seems to indicate that he wants to deal with this. He wants to deal with this issue. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. If we get a chance to chair the Judiciary Committee, those will be the kind of bills that will pass. Again, Biden's going to still be president for a couple of years, but that's the kind of stuff we need to get done.
What would you say are the biggest issues right now that you guys are facing in Congress? Beyond in America right now, would you say top 3 issues?
I think to the American people, it's what I talked about. It's inflation, it's crime, it's those issues that concern the border. Certainly, how can you have a country if you don't have a border? But for me, I think the thing that scares me the most is what they're doing to the Bill of Rights, specifically the First Amendment. I mean, you think about when you got 5 rights. We all, as Americans, have 5 rights under the First Amendment. Your right to practice your faith, your right to assemble, your right to petition the government, freedom of press, freedom of speech. Everyone's been assaulted. Every one of those. I mean, there are still churches today in certain parts of the country where a full congregation can't meet on Sunday morning in America. Your right to assemble. I use this example. I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party about 7 months ago. New Mexico Republican Party in Amarillo, Texas. Because they couldn't assemble in their state. They had to go to Texas to get freedom to assemble as a group of Republicans. I mean, that's not supposed to happen in our country. And you can go right down the list, petition your government. You want to go to your capital to talk to your member of Congress, to petition them to redress your grievances. Up until a couple months ago, you couldn't get in. You have to talk to your member of Congress. You couldn't get into your own darn capital that your tax dollars pay for. And then press and speech. We know what we talk about with speech. I think it's just funny what you laugh at it because it's like Dr. Maloney you just talked about. Ron DeSantis does a roundtable on COVID. A roundtable on COVID. One of the people in the roundtable discussion was Dr. Bhattacharya. Brilliant guy, professor of medicine at Stanford, written in the Wall Street Journal, been on TV. This Governor DeSantis puts it on YouTube. YouTube takes it down and says misinformation. And I'm like, he's a professor of medicine from Stanford. I told a group of people back home, I said, Stanford, it's not the Big Ten, but it's pretty good, right? Come on. So it's like, but that doesn't matter to the left. It's all about control, not about the First Amendment. And we're a country that's supposed to respect the First Amendment. Right. It's one of the things that makes us special, and that's my biggest concern.
And I think a lot of people are also the biggest concern going forward, because all parents think about is what kind of America the children are going to live in. Mm-hmm. And the medical tyranny stuff that we have seen has been out of control, not based in science, not based in rationale, making no sense. I mean, who could have guessed that wearing a mask when you stand and taking it off when you sit, wasn't going to work to stop the spread of, this is crazy stuff. It's almost a game of Simon Says, where Simon Says is Dr. Fauci. Yeah. And yet we all have to capitulate to this. I mean, fortunately, I live in the free state of Tennessee, so I don't have to. how do we even tackle that? I mean, what is Congress even thinking about? Obviously, I've seen you take Dr. Fauci and rake him over the coals. There needs to be a lot more of that.
We keep pointing out the truth. You do it every day, and you do it better than anyone, and we appreciate that. You keep pointing out the truth. I think you start with the fundamentals. When did Dr. Fauci ever put his name on a ballot? The way it works in our country, you put your name on a ballot, you go run for office, you talk to we the people. If they elect you, you make decisions. Not some guy who's never put his name on a ballot, is not accountable to people. So we got to point out the fundamentals, and then you highlight the truth. I mean, think about all the statements we've heard from that it didn't start in the lab, right? Dr. Fauci told us that. He said we weren't funding gain of function, right? 15 days to slow the spread. He told us mask work. He told us that if you get vaccinated, you can't get COVID. I mean, so there's 5 statements that are just blatantly false. I mean, all the evidence now suggests this thing came from a lab. And if you go back, and this is one of the first investigations we have to do if we get the majority, one of the first is we have to, the whole lab leak, everything that gain of, we have to investigate this. January 31st, we know a little bit of information right now. January 31st, 2020, right at the start of this, Dr. Fauci gets an email, 10:32 p.m. on that night. The email says, virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. That is a fancy way of saying this thing came from a lab. He got that email from Dr. Christian Anderson, one of these virologists, who've been getting our tax money that Dr. Fauci's been handing out for years. He got that at 10:32 p.m. Over the next 24 hours, what Dr. Fauci does to cover his backside and to downplay and hide this idea that this thing probably started in that lab that we were funding, our tax dollars were funding. It's amazing. So we need to investigate that, right? That's the first investigation that needs to happen. And frankly, why are we funding gain of function research in that we need to pass a bill that says we're not going to do that kind of stuff. That is dangerous stuff, and we've seen how that's played out over the last couple of years.
All of these unelected bureaucrats, they're here because of Congress. Congress, created the FDA. Congress created the CDC. I would love to see a Congress that re-examines whether or not they're doing more harm than good, especially the CDC.
Yeah.
Setting all these guidelines. I would love to see, if Republicans get power, a Congress that looks at the CDC and says, should we abolish this? OSHA, you just decided to step in and create rules for private companies. Can Congress say, you know what? Abolished. Goodbye. Don't need you.
Guess how many people work at CDC and NIH? 33,000 people. Combined budget, $56 billion. How many studies have they done on natural immunity? Yes. It's like, what are the 33,000 people who get $56 billion a year? What the heck are they doing?
Whatever Bill Gates says?
Yeah, or whatever Fauci says we're going to do today, or how we're going to change the guidelines tomorrow. I mean, who knows? But that would seem to be a pretty... Why do we have to rely on natural immunity studies from Israel and other countries? Mm-hmm. We got 33,000 people. And Dr. McCarry's doing a study on natural immunity, but guess what? They're not funding him. He had to go get private funding to do it. It's ridiculous. And again, I think the good news is here, the country sees it. And we've seen... in the past few months, started with moms and dads, and then it built, but we saw in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin get elected governor. We saw 12 brave jurors in Kenosha, Wisconsin say we're going to follow the facts, the truth, and due process. And I think that is building across the country. And when you talk about these things, as you do in such a compelling way, and others do the same, that's all helping this movement understand we got to get back to the Constitution and the rights that make us a special place.
I want to talk about the book that you released, but first, any political ambitions for you?
No, I want to. Already told you, I want to take back the House, and like I said, Lord willing, I want to chair the Judiciary Committee and focus in on protecting American citizens' rights.
Okay, all right. I think I could see you as a vice president. Definitely see that going on.
I heard someone said that one day. I heard someone said that one day. So
yeah, exactly.
But no, I don't want to do that. But you can be president someday. I'm
nice
over
house.
that.
The vice president's house is nicer than the White House.
You be president someday, and if Lord willing, I'm still around, I'll be campaigning for you. But I want President Trump to win in 24. And then we'll go from there.
All righty. Well, you released a book last November. Tell us about it.
Well, the title says, do what you said you would do. And I wrote every word of it. I tell people I'm old-fashioned or maybe just old, but I do it all. I do it all on a yellow legal pad. My wife, God bless her, we drive many times back from Ohio to D.C., and she'd drive and I'd write. But I talk about the Freedom Caucus. You know, there were 9 of us who formed this group. Governor DeSantis is one of the original 9. Mark Meadows. We start this group. And some of the early skirmishes we had when we decided John Boehner shouldn't be Speaker any longer, and some of the fights we were in. And then I talk about a lot of the big investigations, the nature of the committee assignments that I have on the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee. It seems like I've been involved in every big investigation. That, you know, I was on the IRS investigated, the Benghazi, I was on the Select Committee there, of course, the Mueller thing, and then the impeachment. And so I talk a lot about that, and then I try to take the reader behind the scenes when I got to work with President Trump and interact with him. And I think the reader will enjoy it. Some of the interesting stories when we're in the bunker in the basement and Scalise and Gates and some guys, you know, stormed the bunker, and Adam Schiff, his reaction. I tell that story, and one of the few times I've seen my buddy Mark Meadows actually swear at someone. It was interesting. I try to take them behind the scenes. I think they'll enjoy it, and then talk about what a great country it is. I mean, I'm just a guy who was a wrestling guy and decided to run for office, and I get to, you know, work with President Trump and be involved in a crazy impeachment the Democrats tried to do. So I try to give the reader a feel for all that as well.
That's amazing. All right, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you to Congressman Jordan. You guys stick around. Be sure to get his book, by the way. And up next, I will be answering your questions. All right, welcome back. You know what time it is. Almost at the end of the show. Let's see what your first questions are for me in the new year. Let's jump right into it. Tristan Thompson just admitted that he fathered a child with a random girl while still with Khloe. What advice do you have for women who keep taking deadbeat guys? I mean, obviously the answer here is you have to feel bad for Khloe because being humiliated publicly, just all over the world, people are consuming this news story over and over and over again. You know, she's got to be a very strong person, and my heart really does go out to her, and I don't want to make fun of her. But I do think that there is a lesson here. It's frustrating to watch a woman keep going back, and this is a form of abuse. You often hear, oh, well, we have a child, we want to make it work. I mean, he has treated her like absolute trash in the very beginning, and I hope that what women garner from this story is that the idea that it just gets better or that having a kid is going to make a guy stop being a horrible person is just not reality. It's just not how it happens. Too often people fall for that trap and believe, well, we'll just start a family. Actually, Bruce Jenner on an episode of The Kardashians said something, a piece of advice that I will never forget. He was speaking to Courtney about her relationship with Scott, and he said, when you're dating, it's as good as it's ever going to get. Like when you get married and have kids, it doesn't suddenly get easier and better. And I think that that's a really good piece of advice that everybody should carry with them. You know, people tell you who they are early on. Listen. Next question. Hi, Candace. I'm a huge fan. I wanted to know why you had beef with Meghan McCain. When and how did it start? First and foremost, I just don't like Meghan McCain because she's not conservative. She spent 4 years on The View trashing Republicans because she hates Trump more than she loves her country. And I find it ridiculous that she is allowed to lecture us about who and what we are on the basis of who her father is. Every time she made a point anywhere, she says, well, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy. And that is not, to me, a legitimate form of being able to enter into conversation. So she often refers to people like me and other commentators as trolls and people that don't have careers. If you actually spend time and study Meghan McCain's life, you will realize that everything that she's ever had is because her dad, got her in. She was an art history major who suddenly got an internship at Saturday Night Live and worked for the Daily Beast, all of these left-wing publications, and then went on the trail with her father. So it's the air of pretension and the pompiety that comes from a woman who has actually not ever accomplished anything in her life to think that she has the audacity to speak down to me when I have fought for everything in my life. I did not have parents that could sign anything, started my life $100,000 in student loan debt. I am now a business owner. I run my own 2 businesses and have multiple employees, and I did all of that, by my own. So I just don't like the mentality of people that believe that they're elite on the basis of where they were born. To me, I only honor people who actually work hard. That is your legitimate entry to any discussion with me. Next question. I watched your Trump interview and thought it was good, but was disappointed in his back stance. Do you think he knows the truth but can't admit it because it's his biggest accomplishment? I do not believe that Trump knows the truth. People were really mad at me for saying this on Instagram. No, I think I genuinely, if you understand where we are learning about all of the adverse events that are happening after the vaccine and where we're learning about people that are being injured, this is not being covered in the mainstream media. I mean, a lot of this information, you have to really prowl and look for it. And I think that when Trump gets the news throughout the day, he's reading more mainstream sources. And a part of that is that he has a certain pride in the vaccine. So he doesn't even necessarily want to see if there's anything bad about it. He just wants to make sure that he gets credit for it, as it's being widely distributed. So I think that there's just it's not really transferring over to him what's actually happening and how his base feels about it. And that he would do well to sort of listen to people in his inner circle, talk to him about why people don't like the vaccine. It has nothing to do with whether or not he created it. It's that we question its efficacy, obviously, being that whether you're vaxxed or not, you can catch COVID and you can spread COVID. And we question the medical tyranny that has come along with it, with this incessant need to force inject people against their wills and put their livelihoods at risk unless they capitulate to Big Pharma and Dr. Fauci. So I think on this one issue, Trump is just not listening or quite understanding his base on it. And part of that is the second part of your question, because he created the vaccine. But I hope that now, because of that interview and the feedback that he got from his base, that he will start to reconsider. Next question. Can you tell us how New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago was? It looked fancy. It was fancy. It was absolutely beautiful. They did a very good job. I didn't really know what to expect. There was a big, long red carpet. There was live music, fantastic live music the entire time from start to finish. Old music. They had a big band. It was just a lovely event. It was a great way to spend New Year's Eve surrounded by people that think like you and fight like you, for that matter. Melania obviously looked incredibly glamorous. I just want to be her friend. I always try to talk to her, and her Secret Service agent's like, nope. And I try every single time. They're probably like, there she is again. I'm like, and she's like, nope. There's like all these women that surround her. Trump was in a great spirits. He went around and spoke to everyone, and he told me that he was mad at me because he got such bad feedback on the interview that we did. And I told him I was mad at him. And then that was great. We were good. So next question. Are you really unvaccinated? Really? And then there is a shared tweet that says Candace Owens is lying to her followers about being vaccinated. And it shows me at the UFC. And it's, I guess, planning for your event. Oh, the Madison Square Garden website, which says that you've had at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine prior to attending. I would say to the people, first and foremost, I am obviously unvaccinated. You follow the story of me trying to get a COVID test in Aspen, and I only had to get a COVID test to show that it was negative because I was unvaccinated. So I didn't go through those jumps and hoops pretending to be vaccinated. I am not getting this vaccine ever. Never going to get it. I don't care if I'm on my deathbed and they say it can save you. I'm not going to get it. I'm principally now opposed to it, and I do not understand why anybody who is healthy, able-bodied, and young would ever get this vaccine if you're not at risk of COVID. Again, personal choice. You can choose something differently. Regarding the UFC event, I would instruct you not to visit the Madison Square Garden website, but to visit the New York City Law website. You better understand that every time the elites make laws for you, there is a way that they can get around the laws that they're making for you. And there are carve-outs in New York City of when you do not need to present a vaccine card. Unfortunately, I fall under one of those carve-outs. That's all I'll say about that. All right, you guys, you know that I like to leave you with a silver lining or a glimmer of hope because everything seems so gloom and doom. And I think that Jim Jordan gave it to us. It's just a reminder that we are winning. I think every single day we're just seeing bad news. It's felt like the last 2 years has been nothing but COVID and bad news. But the one thing that I will say is that there are individuals that are fighting and there are issues that we're winning on, and it's hard to see that. Particularly the parents have taken, I think, the biggest stand in 2021. Jim Jordan spoke about that today and said that they have given him the most hope, and they have definitely given me the most hope. It really shows that when we bind together and we really say enough is enough, we are more powerful even than the overseers, even than the medical, tyrannical individuals that are trying to run this country. And always be hopeful that we live in America. And when we look overseas, as sad as it is to see what's happening in Amsterdam and to see what's happening in Germany, the Netherlands, you also have to be reminded that our founding fathers were absolutely brilliant. And they wrote the Constitution in such a way that the federal government could not have a takeover. A corrupt federal government would not have more power than the individual states. I'm here in the free state of Tennessee. AOC's down in the free state of Florida. And that is thanks to our Constitution and the brilliance of our founding fathers. As always, I hope that we have given you something to think about. We will see you next week.